Hey, what's up guys? It's Pedro here from NoobCoder.com, and in this tutorial I want to talk about methods. So all a method is a reusable block of code that we could use throughout our program. Now, we've already been using a method, and this is a special method called the main method. And all the main method does is tell Java, hey, this is the entry point to our Java application. So let's create a method just to show you how it works. I would say public static, just like you would in our main method. And I don't want to go over these two keywords yet. I will go over them in future tutorials when I start talking about classes. But I want you to pay attention to the rest of this line of code. So next we see void, and void just signals that this method does not return anything. So in this example, I'm going to give you one like that. So I'm saying, hey, this method is not going to return anything. Then followed by the name, parentheses, and then the parameters you need. So num1, int num2. So those are the parameters, and then the brackets. So when I call this method, all the code that's in between these two brackets is going to get executed. So in this simple example, I call the method add. What do you think is going to happen? I'm going to add these two parameters, num1 and num2. So num1, num2. Nothing special here. If I hit run, you'll see that it's not getting executed, or we're not seeing anything. And that's because we haven't actually called it. Now I could call add in our main method. So I call add with parentheses, followed by these dots. I keep forgetting what these are called. But this bracket here. And then we need to add two arguments. Why? Because we need to match up with our parameters. So anything in here is called arguments. So I'm going to say 1 and 4. And now if I execute this code, you see that we get 5. So to make things more transparent, let's actually output what's happening within our add method. Num1 has the value of 1. Copy this because I'm lazy. Num2 has the value of num2. And if I execute this, you see that num1 has the value of 1 because it's matching up here. So 1 gets matched up here. Num2 has the value of 4 because 4 gets matched up with num2. So order does matter. So if I was to put 4 in the first position and 1 here, you would get the opposite. So that's basically how we create a method and how we call a method. Now, I want to give you another example, and we could just create another method. So I could say public static, and instead of void, I could return a type. So I could return anything I want. Let's say I want to return an int, and then I'll call this method subtract. Now the same thing happens here. I need to put my parameters that I want here. And what do you think subtract is going to take? It's going to take two numbers, right? Because I need two numbers to subtract. Num2. And now I can say return num1 minus num2. So this return statement is important because if I don't include it, it's going to say, hey, you said that the return type is of type int, but you're not returning anything. So now exactly like we did with the add, we could call it in our main method, and I could call it subtract. And I could say 3 minus 2, right? Yeah, 3 minus 2. Let's give that example. Now if I run this, You see we're not getting any output, and that's because we're not printing anything out onto the console. So it's important if you're returning something to save it in a variable or to output it onto the screen. So if I want to save it to a variable, I could just create one. I could say result is assigned whatever this method returns. And it's complaining that it's not being used. Okay, so whatever this method returns. And now I can actually print out what's in result, run it. So 3 minus 2 is 1. Let's say I don't want to save whatever this method is returning. I just want to print it out. What I could do is get rid of this variable altogether. Put it here. And now this should work just fine. And you see that we do get 1. So I suggest you actually play around with this. You know the basics. So it goes as following: your return type, or you could put void if you don't want to return anything, the name of the variable, and whatever parameters you want. When you call the method, you have to give it the same amount of arguments. So I have 2 parameters here. I must have 2 arguments here. They must match up, otherwise you'll get an error. So I hope you learned something, and I hope to see you in the next tutorial. Like, comment, subscribe.